All right, we've got another large-scale model here in need of a RailPro decoder installation. So this here is a USA Trains SD40, and I've never worked on one of these before or seen one up close, so this should be an interesting model to work on. We'll see what's needed to disassemble it and get things wired in. Now, first things first is getting into the model in order to just see how everything is wired up. And after checking through the instruction manual, they actually don't say anything about how to get inside, except to send it back to the factory for any sort of servicing, which I kind of have to wonder if that also means send it back to them if you even need oil put into it. I don't know. So I'm just going to stick it on top of this sheet of foam here. We'll see what needs to be done. I do see that there's a port in the bottom for a speaker, so I think that's something that will need to be added later on in the installation. But for now, I'm just going to start taking out screws and then hope for the best. I think I'll start with these fuel tank screws. Looks like there are only 2 of them. And yes, that did allow it to be lifted off. Okay, and this looks like it's a connector for a speaker, so that would be convenient. There are also a bunch of switches right behind the front truck here for your lights, smoke unit, sound, and motors too. I'll switch it to on for sound because I think that is something that's going to be installed here, but I'll leave the smoke unit switched off for now. Yeah, everything else will be switched on. Let's see what else we got here. Not really seeing a lot of screws that look like they would be for the body. Well, you know what? Maybe it's these down here. Aha! These are extremely deep screw holes. That's got to be it. I hope. I see 6 of those total. 2 of them are over here underneath the front truck. This would be much easier with a long stemmed screwdriver. This is just barely working. All right, I've got all 6 of those screws out. I'll flip this back over. See if that lets me take the body off. Please. Are there more? There are. There's 2 more over here and 2 more over here, which means I need to go borrow a screwdriver from someone. Let's see, it should be right about here. Why are the truck side frames in the way of the screw holes? At least I can get to these 2 in the back. I guess it's just these 2 left over here. There's got to be a way for me to reach those. Maybe I need to remove this plate that restricts the truck's movement. Ah, there. It's going to be really interesting getting those O-rings back in place. But at least I can finally get to these screws. Okay, it seems like something's finally starting to come loose. Hopefully it's the body. It's starting to come up in certain areas. Not everywhere. Maybe there are even more screws. Maybe I should just remove everything that even looks vaguely like a screw. finally got the body released. So yeah, there were the 10 screws all along the length of the body, in addition to these 4 underneath the cab. So yeah, that's 14 screws holding the body on that have to be taken out. But anyway, I finally have access to the inside, so now I should be able to get things installed and wired up. So I'll just examine all this wiring, see if I can get that figured out. Alright, so the way that this is set up, this board actually has to be removed and just thrown out entirely from the look of it. And all of this will have to be wired directly to the RailPro instead, which means I actually need to buy some resistors in order to make the LEDs work correctly, because I don't want to blow them out by accident. Okay, so after thinking things over and doing some testing, what I decided to do was to remove the plugs from the original PC board so that I can use them as connectors for all the different lights. Then I just put some little markings on there as reminders of how this is wired. I'm using 200 ohm quarter watt resistors for each of the light functions and soldering those to the wires from the RailPro and just putting a bit of heat shrink over that to help protect things. So this should all work, so I'll get the rest of that wired up. We'll see how it does. Alright, so here's my somewhat organized mess. So I have all the different lights attached to the 6 functions coming from the RailPro. So I'm using the first 2 function wires for the front and rear headlights. Next one's for the number boards, and then the last ones after that for the class lights, front and back. And I've also gone ahead and put this PC board back in so that the smoke unit is functional. So I just have these 2 wires are just coming directly from track power. So this will operate using the switch that's on the bottom. So the smoke unit is either on or off. That's the best way I could figure out to put that all together. And beyond that, the motor and track wires are all connected to the RailPro right here. And of course this 5-volt output wire goes over to the 5-volt input over here. But yeah, anyway, that should all be correct now. Oh, and I have the an additional wire for 5 volts going to the positive of all these different lighting connections. So it's the negative terminals that have the resistor and go over to the functions. So if this is all wired correctly, and I think it is, then this should all work perfectly when I put it onto the track. So let's go ahead and get this back together and test that out. One last thing before I finish putting it together, I put the speaker into here, which lines up with the downward facing speaker grill. The screw holes in this one didn't line up with any of the ones that were put into the fuel tank, so there is a pre-installed sound dampening pad in here, or vibration dampening pad. So I just put a ring of glue around the top of that grill, place this down on top, and that seems to be holding just fine. Alright, I powered it on, got an immediate short circuit, and after looking at things again, I found out that they just basically used the same trucks and just swapped them around and didn't even think of matching the wiring. So what you would think is the plus is actually the minus on the front truck, and then plus is red on the rear truck. Now before I pull things back apart for rewiring, I think I can still at least test it. I just separated the tracks here, so it's only picking up from one truck, so that at least gets rid of the short circuit. So let's see. The light works. Front light. About the back, yeah, the back light is working too. Okay. Right, so it looks like the ditch light control on here is currently controlling the cab and number boards. I'll just have to reorganize some of the programming in here, but at least the functions do seem to be working. So it looks like I did get the lighting wired correctly. So I'll just see if I can get the motor trouble figured out, get that rewired so that it doesn't short out, and hopefully things will start to work correctly from there. Okay, another hour later of checking all the wiring, and I think this time I've actually got it. Yes, the motors are finally being controlled by the decoder. Wheels going in the correct direction. Lights working. Get that orientation figured out. How about the sound? I haven't tested that speaker yet. Oh yeah, sound works. All right, and reverse. It's all working just fine. All right, so that is a huge relief for me. So now I'll just get on to the final programming improvements here and there, and also put the handrails onto there so that this is a complete and ready to run model. Alright, so now to finish this model, I just need to get these details installed, which is mostly the handrails. Some of those bags there, but then there's also some other details like the various pilot details, steps. They also give you some optional knuckle couplers to use in place of the hook and loop couplers, but I'm actually going to be putting some different ones on instead of that, so I'll just get started with these. We'll see how it all turns out. So far these are going in pretty easily by hand. Just have to get the tabs lined up with their mounting holes, and then I can just press them in like that. Just give them a firm push. And they stay right there in their holes, no glue required. That's one railing down. Some of the tabs didn't want to go in quite so easily, so I just kind of gave them a final firm push right about there with the tip of these pliers, and that got them in place. I just need to get around to the rest of the railings. All right, details are all installed. The snowplow details, they have these blanks that you just slip out for tight radius, wide swinging. And these here are KD couplers, and I got them installed just by taking off the hook and loop portion of the original couplers and then clipping this piece off of the end of it. So then that just kind of slipped over the shaft, and I put a screw through there. So that's working just fine. It's at the right height. The rest of these details just press in place, except for the lift bar, which does need some glue to hold those rings in place, but the rest of the parts just press into there. These steps here, they actually provided 4 of them, and that's possibly because 2 of the ones that were in there were actually hinged upside down, so they would actually drop down this way instead of lifting up this way like they're supposed to do. But yeah, that is now all the work done on here. So everything's in place. And I think this turned out to be a really good looking model. And even with the frustrations with the wiring and disassembly along the way, it's overall a good quality engine. So if you know what you're doing with it and have some patience, you can get that RailPro or any other electronics you want installed and come out with a really nice model.